India, januari 1995. 3 dagen lang zal de geestelijk leider van Tibet, de 14e Dalai Lama, de Kalachakra-initiatie verrichten. Het is een van die vele oude Tibetaanse mystieke rituelen, waarvan de Tibetaan gelooft dat ze de verborgen krachten van de menselijke ziel op een positieve wijze stimuleren. Deze initiatie is bedoeld om vrede en mededogen, de ware natuur van de geest, te ontwikkelen. Bij de initiatie behoort een mandala die het wiel weergeeft van de kringloop. De mens kan ontsnappen uit de kringloop van geboorte en dood als hij zijn onbewuste leefwijze transformeert tot een hoger bewustzijn en de consequenties leert zien van zijn dagelijks handelen. In de woorden van de Dalai Lama:
We have to know the negative consequences from certain our activities. Now the carelessness about environment, and also I think sometimes the certain kind of the carelessness about our internal the spiritual development. I feel we put I think every effort about the knowledge. Sometimes we are not adequate to pay attention towards the user of the knowledge, the person himself or herself, the proper development. Proper development here means the person developed in the environment of compassion, human affection. So such person with the knowledge, such person can utilize, can use whole his or her knowledge in proper way, more constructive way. So firstly, I think we have to pay more attention about the inner spiritual development. Now here spirituality, inner spirituality does not mean religious faith. Without religion, just simply the fullness about basic human good quality. This is self-confidence, the compassion, affection, altruistic attitude. These are basic human good quality. These are the basic spirituality. You see, we can develop these things without particular faith. And then another thing, the self-confidence. So now here, unless humanity, unless we make some effort, who will solve this problem? We have the responsibility, no one else. Then for that, who will initiate? Individual person must make initiative, must make effort. So here you see this self-confidence, determination, and sincere motivation. I think that is very, very important. I always believe all the major world religions have tremendous responsibility to help humanity. All carry this, more or less the same message, such as love, compassion, forgiveness, spirit of reconciliation. All religion teach us the genuine sense of brotherhood, sisterhood. So all religion have the great potential and have the responsibility, and there are common things, common ground. So all religion can work together in the spirit of harmony. We can work together.
De rituele handelingen worden niet alleen uitgevoerd voor de instandhouding van de eigen cultuur, maar zijn ook heilzaam voor Westelingen. Dat zegt de Dalai Lama, die steeds vaker bezoek krijgt van politieke opinieleiders, zoals de Amerikaanse woordvoerder van de Republikeinen in de Senaat, Newt Gingrich. Waarin schuilt de aantrekkingskracht van het Tibetaans boeddhisme? Is het de Dalai Lama, wiens humor in nauw verband staat met zijn geweldloze strijd voor een wereld van mededogen? Of zijn het de mystieke rituelen van een religieuze cultuur en de leringen van de Boeddha, waarvan de oorsprong 2500 jaar teruggaat in de tijd? Wat fascineert ons in de ernstig rondcirkelende dansers en hun mystieke gebaren die hoorden bij de dans van de zwarte hoed? Deze Tibetaanse dans drukt de overwinning uit van het boeddhisme op een primitieve cultuur, waarbij door wraakzuchtige goden mens- en dieroffers werden geëist. Pas in de 8e eeuw na Christus werden deze zwarte krachten herkend als projecties van de menselijke geest. Zo werd de mens zelf drager van het angstaanjagende, van licht en duister. Werd het menselijk hart het toneel van de scheppingskrachten en werd zo het Tibetaans boeddhisme verrijkt met het inzicht dat de bovenmenselijke wereld zich manifesteert in de menselijke geest. Dat wordt onder andere gevisualiseerd in de zandmandala, spiegel van reflectie over leven en dood. Een plattegrond van de menselijke psyche. De eens zo rijke Tibetaanse religieuze en sociale cultuur is door de Chinese overheersers vrijwel verwoest. Dat wat gered kon worden is onder meer te vinden in de herbouwde universiteit van Mundkot in India. De universiteit maakt deel uit van een Tibetaans kloostercomplex waar ruim 12.000 Tibetanen in ballingschap leven. Wetenschap en religie horen hier nog bij elkaar. Monniken die filosofie studeren, wordt weer op traditionele wijze de kunst van het debat geleerd. Onderwerp is altijd een tekst van de Boeddha zelf. En hier wordt ook college gegeven in een van de best bewaarde geheimen van Tibet, het dodenboek. Het wordt door hen beschouwd als de grootste schat die zij bezitten, omdat het de illusiekrachten van alle dingen beschrijft. Tibetanen zien het leven als een voortdurende veranderende dans van geboorte en dood. In het dodenboek staan de fasen beschreven waarin de geest van een overledene komt te verkeren wanneer deze zich in de tussenstaat van leven en dood bevindt. De ontmoeting met een afschrikwekkende figuur in de gedaante van Yama, de heer van de dood, is onvermijdelijk. Hij houdt een spiegel voor die het aardse handelen reflecteert. Het zijn echter droombeelden die tijdens het leven op aarde in de buitenwereld zijn geprojecteerd als het resultaat.
Fundamental nature, Buddha and we, there is not the slightest difference. Now this I need to do like this for the afternoon to wake you up, isn't it? Are you a little bit awake more now, isn't it? Yes, I know.
Plaats van handeling, de Keizersgrachtkerk in Amsterdam. Een welwillend Nederlands publiek krijgt les van een leraar die zelf ooit de leerling was van een Tibetaans mysticus. Zijn kennis over het Tibetaanse dodenboek en de wijze van lesgeven maken hem tot een internationaal gewaardeerde persoonlijkheid. Zijn naam Sogyal Rinpoche, ook wel de lachende lama genoemd.
It's only an illusion.
In zijn in 1994 gepubliceerde boek, dat in vele talen is vertaald, schrijft Sogyal Rinpoche onder meer dat vooral de mensen in het Westen onnodige angstgevoelens hebben voor de dood. Hij zelf kwam voor het eerst in aanraking met zijn angst voor de dood toen de bediende van zijn leermeester stierf. Sogyal Rinpoche was toen 7 jaar oud.
When he passed away, it was a kind of really a great it really brought some kind of earthquake in my life in a sense. I remember after he died, you see, that night I was sleeping. I always used to sleep with my master next to him. I remember in this temple I can still remember the flames of this butter lamp, were kind of flashing onto the frescoes of the temple, and you can see, and then the whole night I cried. The whole night I cried. I suddenly realized that, you see, that we all have to die, And so, really, the whole night I cried. I mourned for his death. And also I cried to really come to terms with the fear and really to realize. And so I think through that kind of really that coming to face and face with death directly, and then what's wonderful is through the help and the support of the teachings. Because if you are afraid of death just alone, if you do not have the support of the teachings, it's very difficult. And sometimes you don't know which direction you're going to go. Because there's not really a processor, I think that's why I'm so grateful for the teachings and for my masters, is they give you this extraordinary support, the help, which in horror of death, I took to the mountains. And again, I meditated on the uncertainty and the hour of death. Then capturing the fortress of the deathless, unending nature mind. Now all fear of death is done and over with. In many ways, the reason why I think in the modern world, that is particularly in the West, is that we don't look at life and death as a whole. As such, we become very attached to life and reject and deny death. So as such, the death becomes the ultimate fear, the last thing we want to look at. But in reality, really, when you look into death, I often tease people and say, if you're worried about dying, I promise you that you will all die successfully. But then why are we afraid of death, you see? I think we are afraid of death is that the death is the moment of truth, when we come to meet really ourselves face to face. As Dalai Lama, in foreword to my book, he says that two things count when you die. That is to say, how you've lived and the state of your mind. I think Buddhism is so rich in symbolism. And that's why when you have this, like the black hat dance, there was a king who was very, in some ways you could say, evil. He destroyed many monasteries and, desecrated images, And so this black hat dance was kind of the subjugation of this evil force, And so in a sense it's a victory over the negativity. It's a almost kind of reenactment of this destruction of this negative force. Actually, if you look at it, something very interesting is that where is the negative force? It's not outside. It's within ourselves. It's our own negativity that we need to destroy. You're asking, isn't good and evil a projection of the mind? So in response to that, when you realize the nature of mind, you realize that it is a projection of mind. However, to realize that is very difficult. And that's why, you see, we need to go through the whole spiritual journey of purification. And that's why there are only very few beings who have actually realized it fully. But yet, when we have the teaching like this, which shows us how that good and evil are but just the projection of the mind, so that even though we have not completely conquered the evil or the negativity, yet we have more humor about it. We do not take that too seriously. We begin to come to friends with ourselves. We do not even judge our negativity. And we do not really, in a sense, side with either good and therefore kind of, be against the evil in that respect, in that duality. But that you begin to really, in some ways, really have that kind of, how would you say, that kind of the attitude of that, the wisdom attitude to that. And when that happens, that you see, in a sense, in that state, that it is balanced. That almost it is balanced and is neutralized and gradually purified. And this takes a long time. It takes a long time. If you look into the Buddhist teaching, to attain enlightenment is not easy at all. There are so many levels of realization and attainment.
Goed en kwaad zijn schijnbare tegenstellingen die we ontlenen aan wat wij de werkelijkheid noemen. Maar die is veranderlijk. Alleen onze natuur in de oorspronkelijke staat is perfect. Die staat van perfectie kunnen we tijdens ons leven door beoefening verkrijgen, zodat we niet in angst en spijt zullen sterven. Want na onze dood komen we terecht in het bardo, het Tibetaanse woord voor de toestand tussen de dood en de wedergeboorte. Hoe het ons in die tussenwereld vergaat, zal worden bepaald door het moment dat we in de spiegel moeten kijken die de Heer van de dood ons voorhoudt.
The best way to prepare for death is while we're alive here, you see. This is the cross of destination. And here, what we have to work with, we have to work with the mind. We would work with the projections. We have to really work with the, like for example, look at, we make so many stories in our mind. So many stories and so many cinemas, at the end of it, it's an illusion. Of course, while it's happening, it's really real. I mean, for example, this is real, seemingly real, but this is illusion. It is the greatest illusion. And so that you see, all this kind of, the taking things very seriously, taking our projects, our mind serious, all our thoughts serious, our all our rising seriously. This is something we really need to work, because this is where the confusion is. This is where the delusions are created. And so we need to really work with, because when we die, when we no longer have the physical body, then the mind becomes reality. So that if we are very much, like you said, dwelling in and living in the projections, in the delusion, then after we die in the intermediate state, that sometimes it's very confusing. It's difficult. So that's why we have to really work with projections to purify mind, basically to purify mind and to realize the innermost essence, the nature mind. The teachings show you that when you die, there are two kinds of dissolutions. The outer dissolution of the elements and all your aspect of your body that maintains the kind of the life, so to speak, is one process. But there's an inner process which is happening, is that all are also the emotions such as anger, desire, and ignorance, also they die. With that also, ego dies momentarily. It is at that moment, if you have the stability of meditation, which has really brought about the understanding of nature mind, that is to say, you know something of yourself beyond your ego being, in a sense. You come to discover that through your wisdom nature. When you're touched with that, then at that moment of death, when the skylight nature of your mind dawns, then if you're able to have really let go of the ego, that is to say, if you really have risen above the ego, if you can let go of your attachment, grasping and yearning, and unite your mind with wisdom mind of the Buddhas, then you become purer and purer and purer. You kind of clean up your life, so therefore you come closer and closer to a liberation, so that your transmigrations are kind of shorter and shorter. If you look into life, I think, if you look into ourselves, all the mess that we are in, if you just look into your mind, I think probably it took many lives to reach to this level. And then if you look at also the stuff that we accumulated, all the baggage, I think it requires few lifetimes to finish it anyway, So I think one life I don't think is enough, It's almost not logical. And so from that point of view, in some ways, really, whether we believe in life after or not. I think sometimes the problem, I quite understand with people who cannot really believe in the life after, is because it is difficult for us. When we are so, like for example, we are sitting here in this room, it's difficult for us to imagine Tibet, or China for that matter, or India, because they're not a reality at the moment. So because we do not have an idea of this other possibility, we cannot therefore quite see it. But I think what is important to realize is this is some fundamental kind of almost a logic. That is to say, just as there is this moment, which is incarnates from the past moment, and from this moment, it reincarnates the future moment. In a sense, there is a certain continuity that continues. And also, which really in Buddhism, is there is a fundamental natural law or a justice, that really whatever for the good things that we do, in a sense that we will merit from that. Whatever negative things we do, in a sense that is something that we really need to purify. So as such, I think that really realizing there is a life after, or rather, it's kind of that, in a sense, shows that you see there is in fact also that whatever we do actually continues into life and life after. So therefore it really counts, it just does not just end with life. Life is not like an old television set, which you just switch off and it's the end, I think there are many who would like to believe in that kind of a view. But the trouble is, I often say to people to say that, well, if you don't believe in life after, and then you die, and then you find there's life after, what you're going to do? And so I think in that respect, really, I think realizing there is a continuity, that we need to be responsible, that it continues, that kind of, the justice that continues, is important to have you could say, a karmic perspective, a perspective not of seeing this life as just in isolation, but to see it as a part of, not just looking at one chapter or one page of the book of your life, but looking at the whole book in a sense. That I think what Buddhist teachings show you. What I'm really trying to say is that what is, for example, like ego. Ego, by the way, is actually not you. Or not us, really. It is the false view of ourselves. It's the erroneous view of ourselves, with which it creates all these garbage like grasping, attachment, all the negativity, and which creates all kind of suffering. It's like a magnet that attracts all suffering. That is what ego is. And an ego is that which really gives you the most headache. And it also is something it doesn't get along with others also. It's sometimes when you have a problem with other people, it's the ego. We may be fine. There are moments when you're really yourself, you get along with people really well, but when you are in ego, then you don't really get along. So ego is something that is neither useful for you nor useful for others, really. And so in that respect that you see, what we need to do is we need to let go of the ego, to really let go of the ego. Because also ego is not something that is really ultimately really real anyway. It's only like just as darkness only exists in the absence of light. That this ego only exists in the absence of really knowing who really we are. When we realize the wisdom of our nature, in the state of that wisdom of egolessness, there is no such thing as ego. And you come to discover a kind of your true being beyond the ego. When you read the teachings, when you have the support of the teachings, there are so many inspiring teachings when you really go through that really, instead of death becoming a tragedy, you begin to realize it's an opportunity for transformation. What the teachings gives us is a meaning in life and hope in death. And so that when you go through the teachings which support as an inspiration, then the fear kind of really goes away and you begin to really, all our kind of fears and all our concepts and our worries kind of dissolve, and you realize ultimately that you are the judge and the judged. I think God is always forgiving. It is we ourselves that are the judge and the judged. And so as such, we have to come to terms with us. We have to forgive ourselves. We have to. No one can save us. The teachings have shown us the way. As Buddha said, I've shown the path to liberation, but whether you take it or not, it's very much up to you. So that's why we need to come to terms with, through meditation, through contemplation, and really come to really learn to let go and not to be judgmental. I think it's one thing also very important is that you see we have two minds, a judgmental mind and a wisdom mind. A judgmental mind is when we are not aware, when we are not in touch with ourselves. The wisdom mind arises when we touch with our deeper nature through, for example, meditation. Then our mind rises and then the fears kind of dissolve. You realize that they are unfounded. I mean, you know, for example, you know from your own experience, I know from my own experience, there are moments we're very fearful. There are moments when we're not connected, when we're uncertain. And the very same person in another moment, you know, when he or she is in touch with ourselves, that almost the fear is like almost non-existent. So it's very much to do with the state of mind, really. The state of mind. That when you die, the state of mind, you see that how you are, how you've lived, and the state of your mind. The how you've lived is that if you live, for example, a very good life, if you live a good life, an honest life, really, then you don't have to worry about it. There's a very famous story during the time of Buddha, of this woman called Krishna Gautami, who, when she lost her first child, she was grief-stricken. And she went everywhere saying, can anybody bring this child to life? And some woke her, some kind of consoled with her, some kind of... Finally, they said that, well, if anyone is able to bring your child to life, perhaps it's Buddha. So when you went to Buddha and, she sobbed and she was so much with grief that she asked Buddha, could you bring my child to life? And Buddha said, well, I can bring, but provided you bring me a kind of a bowl of mustard seed from a house that has never experienced death. And she thought probably that is easy, so she went down. She was very encouraged, and she went around asking everywhere, and then she realized that wherever she went, someone in that family died. And finally, she really realized through that kind of search, she realized there's not a single family, not a single home that has not really known death. When she realized that the universality of death, then you see, her own kind of grief kind of melted away, in a sense that you see her own grief had blinded her. So then she put the child to the cemetery and came back to the Buddha. And Buddha said that, what have you come? Have you found the master seed? She said no. And she said that, well, because of my own kind of taking this very personally, because I think sometimes the problem with us, we take everything too personally. And so, as a result, it really made her very difficult. It made her suffer. So now they realized the thing. She could just let go. And she said, well, then why have you come? Buddha said, I've come here to learn the truth. So in that respect, that when you begin to realize that the universality of truth, you see, of impermanence, like for example, when we lost our country, Tibet. I was really amazed that, you see, I was quite young, and so I could perhaps cope with change more easily. But what was extraordinary was the elders, and how they would say, they would comfort each other by saying, just as Buddha taught us that everything is impermanent, so what is happening to us is this great impermanence. So instead of really kind of making it embittered or becoming hopeless through change and loss, they come to the home, to the truth of impermanence, which really made, in fact, how would you say, which really deepened their understanding and realization, which some ways enriched them. Because I think what is important is often, unfortunately, we always associate change and impermanence with losing. But actually, something quite extraordinary. This is what, when I really start teaching on death and traveling and writing on the book on death, that I would reflect deeply on impermanence. And I found it to be so extraordinary. The impermanence is such a key to the understanding of really nature of life. If you can only appreciate that, if you can only appreciate that really, that it is really like when you really let go and you realize and accept impermanence, like, you know, changes are like losing the clouds, but then when you really realize the truth of impermanence, it's like you lose the clouds, but you gain the sky.
De Tibetaanse wijsheidstraditie moet tot elke prijs in stand worden gehouden, schrijft Sogyal Rinpoche in zijn boek over leven en sterven. Bitterheid of gevoelens van hopeloosheid over de ballingschap kunnen door diepe meditatie overwonnen worden. Maar er zijn vele manieren waarop we de vergankelijkheid kunnen aanvaarden en toch van het leven kunnen genieten. Dit inzicht is niet exclusief voor alleen Tibetanen. Sogyal Rinpoche deelt het, zoveel als maar mogelijk is, met mensen die er zich voor openstellen.
To demonstrate this point, there's a small example that I use, which people sometimes find helpful, which is often really we hold on to things because if we let go, we lose. Like, for example, if you take a coin, you know, the reason why we hold on to it, because if we let go, we lose. And so that initial kind of the view or the intention of holding on to is actually quite right in a sense. But only thing is that we are kind of erroneous or wrong in that by holding on to, such as, for example, life itself is very kind of fluid, like water or like air or like space. We cannot hold on to. Like if you take the example of butter. If you really squeeze the butter, it just escapes between your fingers. Like you cannot, holding on to, unfortunately, does not let you have it, unfortunately. If you hold on to it and then you can have it, by all means do it. But because even if you hold on to it, it escapes you. So therefore, it shows that, you see, it's not really sound. Not only you cannot hold on to, but that when you hold on to grasp, it only causes further pain. So in that respect, there's actually an alternative. What the teaching showed, there's another alternative, which is to say, you take this coin, for example, and you take it like that. And you open your arms, and you still have them. So in that, you see, you can let go and still have them. Like, for example, like when you open your hands, you see, you can have the space. If you hold the butter, you can still have them. But yet you're not grasping onto it. So therefore, if you really realize that if you really let go, you don't lose them. You can, in fact, have them. What we have to let go is our kind of the grasping, our attachment. And that if we can really let go of the attachment, that in a sense we can really then love. Like, for example, in love, often it is the attachment that really spoils it. It is when we really can let go and learn, because often love is a learning process. It's sometimes very painful to really have to learn to let go of attachment. And that more and more we let go, and more we give space, more and more we can really love freely, in a sense, in that more, you know. And so in that respect, you can really let go and still have it, like the piece of this coin, if I can find it. Rises. If one were to really discover that sky-like nature of mind from which everything emanates, arises, Then one becomes the master, one rich. They have a living knowledge, a living kind of method of secret know-how of how to awaken the nature mind. That's why I think in this day in the world, really, in this age of aggression, the love is really the answer. As Buddha said, anger cannot destroy anger. Fire cannot destroy fire. It's kind of a testimony to this Buddha nature, that in our love, in our compassion is the Buddha nature. It's something in you, like your face. You know, you have it all the time with you, but you don't see it. The teaching and the teacher are like the mirror, which really shows you who you really are. And that point is not follow the mirror, is the recognition. That's why Buddha said, rely not on the personality of the teacher, but on his message. One point perhaps that needs to be also said as regards the sand mandala also is that even that is an illusion. So as a symbol of that, we create all the mandalas with so much care and so much precision. But yet in the final, it goes back into the water. It's really thrown into, it becomes one with the element of the earth. It's thrown into the water, becomes part of the nature, part of the environment. You could say it's a practice of environmental healing, you can say purification. Our body is the mandala. You see, that within ourselves we need to realize that. And it's how we perceive. And so that in that we do not become holding on to the reality as something really existing. So that in a sense, Buddhism is extraordinary. It really does not fall into any extreme view. And that's why it's called the middle way. One begins to see everything in perspective. And from that perspective, then one begins to realize that you see, even though on one hand, that everything is very real, but yet on the other, a deeper level, that it is actually an illusion. Because what really matters is not so much what happens to you, but how you understand, how you learn, how you realize, how you deepen the understanding, how you develop, therefore, love and wisdom and compassion. Really, very much that. Tibet is a light. This light has come all over the world. I mean, this is not what I'm saying, because I'm a Tibetan, perhaps I'm a little bit biased, but I think this is what so many people have said, and it's in so extraordinary way. For many people, Tibet is something really, you could say there's an outer, inner and secret Tibet. The Tibet in many ways lies in the heart of people, this wisdom kind of environment, the place that we all long and seek for. And as such, Tibet is this great symbol. Whilst the rest of the world were developing technological development, that Tibet, in the kind of the laboratory of Tibet, for centuries, that the great minds of Tibet has been perfecting the spiritual technology, so to speak. And so that this spiritual knowledge can make such a great contribution in the world where you realize that the material progress does not bring the happiness, the ultimate happiness. As Jesus said, man does not live by bread alone. But yet at the same time, it is also that Tibet is under a great threat of really of extinction, and that's one of the reasons why I think the freedom-loving people of the world, as well as also people who really appreciate this extraordinary wisdom culture, must really do all that you can to really help so that Tibet is not forgotten, that these people are not forgotten, that these suffering beings are really cared for, and that the one day that they will have the liberty to really live and to practice this great tradition. We are talking about happiness and suffering of 6 million people. And that's what also the appeal I've made in my book too. And in fact, I ended my book with a prayer of how what I really hope and will happen. That I pray that one day that Tibet will become a zone of peace, which is the zone Dalai Lama very, very much dreams of, you see. Not only a dream, but it could be a reality if we put our mind together. Because you see, world is what we make of, and a place where perhaps these spiritual technologies could be reenacted in order that world at large can benefit, because there's never a time where these wisdom traditions are more needed than ever before.